You summoned me, master.
Oh, yes. Servant, man. Tell me your name is Kev. Listen, I need you to find a wife for my only son. About 1,000 miles that way.
It would be my honor to take on this task. You have my word.
I need you to promise me.
Well, we could shake on it.
No, handshakes are too informal. Just the idea. Reach down here and grab my balls while making this promise.
I don't know about that.
Tickle my balls.
Everyone, welcome back to the Power of God and Anime. I am Duffy, your resident Duffy. And these are our other guys. Go ahead.
This is Gary.
Introduce yourself.
You might happen to be the resident Duffy. But I am also here, and I am the anime trainer, and we have also...
Gary, who is Gary.
As you can tell, we are professionals that have been doing the whole podcast thing for many, many days. Today, because it's October and everyone's in that spooky horror mood, Steven actually suggested that we tackle, what's it called? Lovecraftian horror.
Yes.
Lovecraft. H.P. Harold Pymologist Lovecraft, whatever his...
Actually, you know what? It really doesn't matter what his real name is. It's HP. That works.
H.P. Lovecraft.
MP Lovecraft.
You might know him as the creator of Cthulhu and the Necronomicon, but he is really the creator of his own subgenre of horror, and that's
Cosmic
pretty
horror.
cool. Pretty cool to be able to say, I not only invented a genre of literature, but it's named after me.
And the cool thing about Lovecraft stuff is that he sort of left it open. And
It's all public domain stuff.
Yeah,
really.
anybody can write in it. Anybody can expand on the mythos. There's a bunch of different stuff that goes on with it. And so there's a lot of stories about
games.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories and games and other stuff, especially with, the most common, the most recognizable being Cthulhu. But there's like a lot of other big baddies out there in the Cthulhu, like in that universe, and so it's actually pretty in depth. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it, but on some level, it's also like branched off into other things like Evil Dead or whatever, like with the Necronomicon and the Evil Dead universe. So I mean, like it's pretty far-reaching.
Absolutely. And there's enough tentacles to where it can be included in anime. So, that's cool.
You are absolutely correct. Anime that we probably shouldn't watch.
Not if we're going to be on this podcast.
But, yeah, so...
we've been excommunicated from our own podcast. We created it, and God kicked us out.
And you might wonder, well, why is this, why would this be included in, it's not anime. No, it's not anime. But as far-reaching as the, concepts of Lovecraftian horror are, they reach into things, into other series all the time. Because the concept of like the elder gods or the great old ones, or you'll see something that basically just looks like Cthulhu, but they don't say his name. And there's even, like minor references to things like in anime thing. I can't off the top of my head, but like all of the different, the tentacle monsters. It's like, basically there you go. You have a writhing mass of tentacles. It's like, you think Lovecraft. And it's so much so that there's this, you can see that the monsters and the deities in the Lovecraft universe have almost on some level, like in general mythology, been accepted as like deities. Because you'll see representations of the Greek gods and the and like the Norse gods in popular culture. And it's like, if there's a bad guy that they need, that's like a generalized bad guy, they might use a Lovecraftian monster. I don't know if have you guys seen the new Sabrina?
No.
I've not, no.
Okay, so this is minor spoiler, but not a big deal. They reference like some Lovecraft stuff in there in one of the later seasons. And it's like alongside of this whole, like, there's God and the devil and all this stuff going on here, and there's this. It's almost like this is a third party being involved. So like it reaches into various other stories, and I don't think it's going away. If anything, I think it's probably going to grow and be adapted like into various other mythos over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, like you were talking about it being accepted in other forms of media, like even 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. I'm not sure about the other editions; they probably have it as well. But one of the patrons for the Warlock is a great old one. I mean, that is Lovecraft. I mean,
that's straight Lovecraft.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, I think it's not going away. Like you said, if you need like a bad guy who's not just like bad, but also like looks like the epitome of evil, like any knowledge of Lovecraftian monsters or deities, whatever you want to call them, is like there are no discrepancies about how this is an evil being. This is a chaotic, destructive, just maleficent, if you will, just type of creature.
No, and I mean, like even in you may not have caught this, even in Supernatural. I don't know if you guys have watched any of that. But in the season that they had the Leviathans, which is season 6, I think, and the Leviathans are introduced through, like, I think they go back in time, and they are like in Lovecraft's house.
Oh.
They either go back in time or they go to Lovecraft's house, and there's like this whole tie-in with that. And so like pointing to that the Leviathans are what
inspired Lovecraft. That's always fun to do. A little time travel shenanigans.
And like I said, I don't remember if it's been a long time since I've seen that season.
It sounds like something they would do in Supernatural. I think we watched up until season 10 before we realized it's literally the same plot every season. To an extent. I know they do different things, but
no, you're definitely right. It's
you bring up Gary bring up Dungeons and Dragons or Cthulhu or the old gods are mentioned in there as a patron. It is a slight problem that just anyone can use it because it's can become like a cheap way to just get away with, oh, here's a recognizable monster that people will no, I don't have to put any work into this. There is a movie that I have to believe is supposed to be a parody, but it is a movie based off of one of those old Chick tracts. If anyone has ever seen or read a Chick tract, there's a whole Twitter dedicated to taking comic panels out of these little Chick tracts out of context, just be like, look how ridiculous this is.
Gary, I know you've seen a Chick tract.
I
if you're a Baptist, you've definitely seen a Chick tract.
I have utilized said literature.
So. We had them in my family too.
Not just seen it, utilized it.
I've kept it in my pocket.
My mom was the kind of person that would like stick those with the candy on Halloween night and hand them out to people. Sometimes no candy, just the pamphlets.
Just the pamphlets.
She wondered why the house got egged. But there's this one that they had, and it was all about the terrible dangers of Dungeons and Dragons. And so somebody bought the rights to that track to make a movie about, and it has to be a parody because it's so. It's kind of like a self-aware parody. Like the people who sold the rights didn't realize they were selling it to people that weren't going to take it seriously. But of course, they had to throw in some sort of monster for some reason that wasn't in the original track, so they just throw in Cthulhu. Just yep, Cthulhu's here. By the way, in this world of the Chick track, and if these kids play D&D, then oh boy, Cthulhu's going to rise from the ocean and destroy everything.
Roll for initiative.
Your AC is nowhere near high enough for that.
So it's like, if you do it correctly, implementing a Lovecraftian monster, it can be done. It can be such a great thing because it's going to be instantly recognizable as something that you should take seriously. Just, if you're a creative type, don't just throw it in there because you think unless it's a parody, which, again, this has to be.
Hellboy, the first Hellboy movie.
Okay.
There was like the tentacles coming out of the sky because they're summoning the old the old gods or whatever and then the monster that comes out of Rasputin is basically Cthulhu.
Yeah.
And so like it's not just like in a few places, it's everywhere. And at some point it's going to get like, okay, we get it. It's Cthulhu. We get it. It's a Lovecraft monster. And at some point people have got to start like trying to subvert some of those like
I think like themes. A main characteristic of like a Lovecraftian monster is that they don't care. I mean, they are so beyond like human comprehension or human like emotion or feeling, is that like you have this huge cosmic entity that can wipe out all life and they don't even like it's nothing to them.
Or maybe they don't even think about it at all. Like different there's obviously like different levels of and different types of creatures. Like for instance Yog-Sothoth actually communicates sometimes with humanity. And then Shub-Niggurath is actually worshipped on numerous species and different races on the planet Earth also. And then you've got things like Azathoth that basically like people are aware of Azathoth, but Azathoth is not aware of anything because it's depending on where you're reading about Azathoth, he either is the creator of the universe or the first thing in the universe, or he is the creator of the universe in the sense that he's dreaming everything. And if he wakes up, everything ceases to exist.
Yeah, it's like primordial nuclear chaos of everything. But yeah,
Out of curiosity, what does that specific old god look like?
So you can't really like pin that down on most of these guys. They look like many things.
Okay.
So when you talk about Azathoth, he might look like a writhing mass of tentacles, mouths, eyes, and orbs, and other things like that. But technically, he's at the center of all existence. So there's really no way to know how large that he is. And I want to say that you can summon pieces of Azathoth. But that's probably a bad idea.
Yeah.
Ordinarily is.
Yeah. Most descriptions are just like huge, crazy, like mass of tentacles and whatever.
And then you might have also descriptions of the smaller creatures that are around him drumming or piping in order to keep him asleep.
Yeah, because once he, like you said, once he awakes, it's game over for everything.
Yeah, which is it's pretty interesting. Go ahead.
Which that's an even, going back to Dungeons and Dragons, like that's a concept within D&D with like a beholder, which has its 10 like eye stalk tentacle things. But the way beholders are created is that one beholder dreams of a beholder, and like another beholder comes into existence in like D&D lore.
Interesting.
So like through sleep.
I feel like that's got to be drawn from Lovecraft on some level.
Oh yeah, that's some pretty heavy influence. But yeah, even these.
But I mean, go ahead.
I was gonna say like you mentioned earlier, these deities who, for most reason, for the most part, don't care about anything, or their goal is destruction or whatever, have their cults. Like there's one I got it here because I didn't want to forget it, is like Ammon Gorloth, and apparently he's like the creator of the Nile, and he's buried under the sands of Egypt and stuff. Like he's like the primary god there. So I mean he don't care about nothing.
Yeah, I was reading something earlier that was saying that that Yog Sothoth, there's some people that think that Yog Sothoth was at one point under Mount Sinai, and was what spoke to Moses, and might be Yahweh. But there's literally no like textual support for that. Like it's just like one of those things that people talk about. So like that's not really a supportable thing from like story or anything. But so there's apparently like, Lovecraft, and then there's the expanded mythos, and then there's the stuff that people talk about that they don't actually write, but they just like talk about it in general, which I guess on some level holds some weight. But I guess the thing about it is you can literally just do whatever you want to with it.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because that plays very much into the kind of chaos that they are. Nothing's ever like pinned down for them. It's in a constant state of flux, which they in their forms are very frequently in a constant state of flux. So why would not also their canon be?
Absolutely. And it's definitely like on point for the genre of cosmic horror, because I mean in late 19th century you have gothic horror. I mean you have vampires, but vampires are allergic to sunlight, allergic to garlic, allergic to silver. Can't seem to like they have distinct weaknesses, and like they're monsters in the closet. But I mean Frankenstein has a weakness to fire. I mean werewolves allergic to silver. So I mean there are different gothic horrors, and they can be scary, but cosmic horror is on a whole different level because they're scary because they're immensity, and that there's nothing you can do to stop it. I mean, you're driven insane. It's a battle of the mind and not just the flesh.
I mean, just looking at Cthulhu is supposed to drive you mad.
Yeah.
So there's no steps to take to defeat anybody.
Yeah. Like there's RPGs of Call of Cthulhu, and there's video games of Call of Cthulhu where like as the person you're like driven insane through playing the game and everything because the influence of Cthulhu.
So this is not like on the level of like a Great Old One or anything like that, but like the creature from The Thing, the shape-shifting mass of flesh that just can kind of be whatever, and it's I feel like that's like on the same level of like cosmic, like it's cosmic horror, but like if it was in the mythos of the Cthulhu mythos, that it would be like a smaller level monster, or like a piece of a larger creature.
Yeah.
But like when I think like execution of like cosmic horror, I think about that. I think about there's this movie where it's another shape-shifting monster that calls itself Bale. Because apparently it's lived like underneath the earth for a very long period of time, and it's been alive for so long that people started calling it Bale, and so it thought it was Bale. And that's sort of like Lovecraftian. I think that's done well because there's no like, you can't point at it and go, this is what it looks like.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, Event Horizon is very good cosmic horror. If at some point sort of silly. But yeah, I think it's a cosmic horror is hard to do in when you can see the monster.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because if you can
Mm-hmm.
see it, you can define it. Part of the big portion of cosmic horror is that when it's described, when the monsters are described, especially in the Lovecraft like universe, you can't really pin down what they look like for the most part. And some of them can appear as, whatever.
Yeah.
Which, if you look at ancient religious texts in there's plenty of deities that look like a collection of things.
Mm-hmm.
Or even like angelic beings that look like a collection of things. Or like freaking wheel with eyes all over it.
I was about to say, like, Ezekiel chapter 1 comes to mind. The eye on the wheel within a wheel, and the eyes and all that craziness going on.
It's like you look at that and you're like, yeah, okay, all right, Lovecraft, I see what you're talking about.
Like, what? And the collection of things. I mean, that's another one. The being with four faces: the face of a man, the face of a lion, the face of an ox, and the face of an eagle. I mean, so definitely. I mean, there are some. Parallels.
There's like some theological implications for what each of those things are, like as far as like a metaphor of what those are supposed to stand for.
Right.
And some of those are cached in like Ugaritic like mythology, like pre-Jewish culture, Babylonian mythology stuff. That's not to say that the Hebrews stole it. So much so that those theological concepts present in their mythos would be used by Hebrew writers to say a certain thing, if that makes sense. That would make sense to other people.
Right, like a common ground kind of thing. Like, hey, if I use like this example of an eagle, like God using an eagle for a symbol for something, okay, everybody's going to get what I'm saying here. Or, an ox or a lion or, whatever.
So, like, for instance, God being over the chaotic waters at the beginning of Genesis, that's paralleling early Near Eastern creation myths, things that you would see about El or Baal or the slaying of I can't remember what the name of that, Tiamat, stuff that would just be like things that there's this primordial chaos and the gods bring forth order from this primordial chaos. And so the text in Genesis is borrowing those concepts and saying, no, it's not these gods that did this. Yahweh did this.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like a lot of the things that you're seeing in Genesis, in the creation myth, like from the creation myths of Ugaritic creation myths and things like that with El and Baal, those are stabs at those myths.
Yeah. Which
just
is
like
pretty
we talked
on
about
point.
previous.
I
Yeah,
won't say.
yeah.
Oh,
Well, I mean
sorry.
that's basically par for the course
Yeah.
for how Yahweh operates with the rest of the sons of God. Like, so it's like, yeah, all the things in Egypt, 10 plagues. Oh, yeah,
Yeah. I'll say. I think we
just
mentioned
slapping them
before
left and
that.
right with it. Yeah, we
Yeah, all
talked
those
about
plagues
that
were,
previously.
were to a certain, someone on the pantheon of the Egyptian, roster there. So they weren't
And
just
it's
like
basically
random.
saying, like, all of you other cultures, you give your allegiance to these deities that are lesser Elohim, and it's like you don't realize that the Most High God
Mhm.
is the one that actually does all of these things. He's
Yeah.
the one that brings the rain. He's the one that gives life.
Right.
And so yeah. Anyway, sorry, I got off topic there
No, that's cool.
a little bit.
It's kind of what
Always
we
do
do here.
that.
I was just thinking how, like Duffy mentioned earlier about he brought up how even seeing Cthulhu or whatever can drive you insane. But like you think of how no one has seen God. If they see God, they would die.
Yeah.
We saw
Or how
it with
it's
Moses.
written.
Can only see a bit of him.
Yeah, and his face, was
Glowed, and they had to put a cloth on
physically
him.
glowed.
Yeah.
They
Well,
veiled him.
so here's a concept, and I obviously, like, that's ancient concept. There's plenty of deities from various mythos who embody. That's not to say that they're human, but they look like they've got a body when they show up to
Mhm.
talk to people.
Right.
And that body might look like whatever. And the same thing happens in Genesis when you have at the beginning in the garden, God walks with Adam in the cool of the day,
hmm
and it's not like it's almost a sense like I wouldn't say that that's not that you could say that might be a metaphor for just like fellowship with God, or at the same time you could say that that's God embodied.
Right.
But at the same time you can still say no one has seen God, because that's just God being embodied. That's not God in his full glory, sort of thing.
Right.
And in the same way, go ahead.
I was going to say, you have those who write about like pre Bethlehem, appearances of Christ, these theophanies, Christophanies. For instance, there's many people who think at the beginning of Joshua that messenger of the Lord is Jesus himself, because of the way Joshua pays obeisance to him. So
yeah.
Or how?
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was going to just give another example of how in Daniel, Book of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the furnace.
Yeah. And then you have the fourth person in the furnace, sort of thing.
Fourth is like the Son of God.
So anytime that you see the angel of the Lord, not an angel of the Lord, but the angel of the Lord, that is basically synonymous with Yahweh, because it says he bears his name. And also he is able to forgive sins. Like, if you remember the cold to the lips thing.
Isaiah.
So yeah. I'm bad with placing where things go. But so anytime that you see the angel of the Lord, it's Yahweh embodied, not incarnate. So it's like Jesus but not Jesus, sort of thing. And there's ancient in pre-Second Temple literature, Judaism, would look at that and say, yes, there's this concept of two Yahwehs. And it wasn't until 3rd century AD or CE, whatever you want to call it, that they said that was heresy, because they obviously that would point to giving some credence to Christianity.
Right.
But there was this concept of there being two powers in heaven. There was Yahweh, and then there was the angel of the Lord that was a second Yahweh.
How do they explain the angel of the Lord now?
I couldn't tell you that. I only know so much.
Are you sure?
I only know.
I thought you have
a layman.
Knowledge of everything.
I have approximate knowledge of many things. Yes,
many things. So
this
falls outside of that.
Jewish traditions outside of Israel.
Yeah, and so that because I had heard people say that the angel of the Lord, in those instances that's sort of a Christophany sort of moment. But it wasn't until I was aware that that ancient pre-Second Temple Jews thought of that as being the case, as there being those two powers there, that there's a sort of pre-Godhead, there was a Godhead idea prior to Christ, and it's like, okay,
well, there you go.
That's interesting. And so, like, when we look at the Cthulhu mythos, we have those beings being existent in one place or another, or maybe even outside time. Like, for instance, with Yog-Sothoth, he's outside time and space, but also synonymous with time and space, but can become something. He can be, in time and space at a particular point in time, looking a certain way, even like a human being. And it's so crazy that you could look at that and draw and like say, okay, I understand that. Like, explain to me as like in a modern scientific sort of like time and space idea, and say, you know what? I can draw a parallel from that idea to the Trinity, and make that make sense.
Yeah.
On some, not. It's obviously not a 1-to-1 correlation, but just like those ideas.
Yeah, like giant tentacle monster. Obviously not going to be 1-to-1. But...
Yeah.
Well, you better hope it's not a giant tentacle monster at the bottom of the earth, or the center of the earth, whatever. So my brain I've been listening to you guys talk about this, and my brain's been like picking up on small things and going on its own rabbit trails at the same time. So this is going to be like little, where did this come from? But I was thinking about, you look at Cthulhu, you go mad, and I mean, I think it was you, Gary, that compared that to, in the
Seeing
Bible,
God and dying.
Seeing God and dying. I started wondering, like, what about God, seeing God would cause somebody to die? Besides just,
really?
Like, is it like, yes, really?
I can see that pretty, but like I can imagine numerous ways that could be.
No. So can I. That's the thing. I'm wondering what's like the most. I'm not saying I don't believe that someone would die if they saw God. Obviously, someone would die if they saw God. I accept that. I'm wondering what the steps are in seeing God and leading to, yes, you're dead now.
So I think you can look at Now, this is me just sort of like,
because I was actually had a thought process for this. I thought
okay.
Is it just a matter of, if you see God, and especially in his entirety, like, is it just overloading your senses and your brain just like short circuiting you? Because like Moses saw just a tiny little glimpse, and it affected his body so much that it affected him, like the way it's described in Exodus for whoever knows how long. I don't even remember if it just says how long he was like that.
Was he glowing? Was that it?
Yeah, his face was glowing. They had to put like a blanket over him so they didn't blind everybody else. And I'm not entirely sure, how you could explain seeing God makes your face glow, but just thought like
okay, so I don't know, like obviously you could posit like it's any number of physical sort of things, but there's this concept uh in that time period about sacred space and being the concept of holiness being like set apart, um and it's not so much that like uh okay, I'm probably going down too much of a rabbit hill, but rabbit trail. Basically, what it is that the uh, the concept of that sacredness is so alien to the mundane physical body that you have,
Hmm.
that it's just like, for lack of a better term, oil and water. But oil and water that sets the oil on fire or something. It's like um, it's magnesium and water.
so.
um,
I was going down the
yeah, I
rabbit trail
mean,
because I had the question of what, like, is Lovecraft or any of his creatures in anime, and from what I can't find much of anything. Like, despite being very prevalent in a lot of Western horror and stuff, doesn't seem like there's that much of it, if any, really, in anime. Like, not even in Yu-Gi-Oh, which I would have figured, like, probably a Cthulhu type monster in those card things. Nope, apparently not. So I've been trying to draw parallels between um, the anime and Lovecraft simply because it's an anime podcast.
Sure. I mean, there are some small references in various not hyper popular series
Mhm.
um about for Lovecraft. So I mean, like, they do exist. But yeah, it's like I said, it's not a huge
right.
amount.
The closest I could come to making a connection, and this is where I was going with this, would be in FMA when you got the Gate of Truth, but had all these deity names and myths on listed there, and seeing what's on the other side costs you physically after you get out. The so
Sure, it's the cost, it's the price for.
it's the price of seeing something that a human shouldn't see. It's not. It's very approximate, I know, but it's the closest I
Gotcha.
can come
No, I
up
mean,
with.
that
Sure.
makes sense.
That's
I mean,
that makes sense. I don't know that that's straight up like limited to like a Lovecraftian idea. I think
Sure.
it's just like any encounter with deity is going to change a human being.
right. Like
I'd
the
be
whole
curious
concept.
to examine.
Go ahead, Gary.
I was gonna say like the concept of like Cthulhu, like seeing him. You're talking about a creature, deity who is like hundreds of meters tall. Like yeah, we see buildings that are tall, but we like you see a creature who is that tall and just like moves and like acts with its own intent. I mean, can like understandably make you seem so tiny in the realm of cosmic things. I can see
Yeah.
where we can link that to someone going insane, and I can see that with the parallel of the cost for power in FMA is some physical thing, whereas the cost of the cost of knowledge and is cost of Roy Mustang lost his eyesight, and the cost for knowledge for Cthulhu is you lose your mind.
And there's like one particular deity. I guess it is Yog-Sothoth that he likes a lot. He's petitioned a lot for like sacred knowledge or like forbidden knowledge rather.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously the cost of that is like very high. So people going nuts or whatever else. And there you could say that there's only so much that a human mind can take. We may not even understand. We don't understand the true nature of the universe, and seeing the true nature of the universe would make you go crazy. So nothing that you do in your normal mundane life anymore would make any sense. Why am I doing this? The true nature of reality is this. So,
Mhm.
and that's completely different than what I've been doing. So I give up. And or it may be one of those things where I know for a fact that if like you walk outside and you look at a city and all of a sudden there's a giant monster going over the top of it, I know people who would straight up just off themselves
Yeah, who
at
just
that
jumped from the
moment.
building they're in. Yeah,
I'm done. Goodbye.
yeah, that's
I
it.
know people who would do that
Yeah, I don't think that's a
rather
far
than live in a
stretch.
rather than live in a world where that is reality.
Hmm.
I think a lot of people would do that, like more than like you know specifically people that would do that. I would bet money that most people would at least have the thought of suicide cross their mind or something
Oh
like
yeah,
that.
you look out there and
You
you
had
see
people
Godzilla like wrecking stuff. You're like, okay, well, I guess heck,
I'm
when
we're
the
done.
done.
stock market crashed in 1929. You had stockbrokers jumping out of built like skyscrapers
Yeah,
over the economy crashing. If you see Godzilla or Cthulhu or some giant monster rampage through the city, be like, that's kind
and
of a much bigger deal.
why did
And
those stockbrokers jump out windows? And
they
because
were kind of
they're
responsible for what happened,
well,
or they
not
thought
just
it was
that, but their whole reality, the thing that they had
shattered.
placed all of their
Yeah.
reality in, was no longer present.
Yeah,
And so it's like, oh no, when your whole world just dissolves.
yeah,
Sometimes the only option you have is I'm going to end it, and or rather, the only one that you can see is I'm going to end it. And so I think when confronted with, uh, you know, Lovecraftian eldritch beast of horror, that might be one of those things that's the only thing you see.
Body gets
So
that. Task
yeah,
manager pulls up, force
which
quit, end
to
task,
yeah,
end processes. Just shut down. We're done. Don't even have to kill him. It's just shutting down. Game over.
in which to pull this to the theological side of things, you know, James writes how that the Bible, the Word of God, is a mirror for people, and when they see the truth, they do one of two things: they can either accept and abide by the truth, or they turn away and are worse off for it. You know, so I can pull that into a theological sense. People see the truth, and they see what is exposed, and you know, and their whole worldview can be shattered, and so there's they only have a couple of options, and sometimes they're just they're better off thinking, well, I'm not even going to submit to that kind of reality. So
yeah.
they spiritually kill themselves, if you will. you know
Sure, sure. And as much as this makes people angry when I say this, some people definitely do this. And because not everybody is evidence driven in their lives. So some people do believe what they want to.
yeah.
Like there's plenty of people that look at I have evidence for this, I have evidence for this. I'm going that based on what I've seen, what I'm going to believe is X because that's what it seems to be pointing to. If I get some other evidence that points me in another direction, I'll believe that. But there are some people that say, okay, I'm going to choose to believe this because of X, Y, or Z.
Hmm.
And no matter what evidence I get, that might be contrary to that, what I'm going to say is I assume this and going to explain away this based on the assumption of the thing that I'm currently believing. And that's not to say that I'm just being like, oh, atheists do that, because no, I mean some
No, I
do.
mean,
I talk to them. Some do, and some theists or whatever you want to any sort of religion, they assume X,
hmm
and no matter what, you are going to have that be the case, no matter what evidence you give to them.
yeah.
And you'll
Um,
find plenty of Christians that do just that.
yeah, absolutely, and and then I would say that that's wrong.
Yeah.
You shouldn't. I think you should wrestle with it. You should wrestle with the text. You should
Yeah.
wrestle with your beliefs.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. I mean, come to the conclusion that whatever the truth is, that you abide by it. But I mean, not even in a spiritual sense. I mean, people believe what they want to believe. I've known several people who, they need to see a doctor because they probably have diabetes or they probably have, cancer, or they have some. They're like, well, if I don't go see a doctor, then I don't get a diagnosis, and if I don't get a diagnosis, it means I don't have it. I was like, no, that's not how
That's not how that works.
things work. Like, you have, these symptoms, more than likely you're diabetic. Well, I've never been diagnosed. That doesn't mean you're not diabetic, or that doesn't mean you're not, you don't have these particular health problems. I mean, same thing. Yeah, people, believe what they want to believe, and that's applicable through, many facets of life, not just, religion or health or,
Yeah,
whatever.
it doesn't even have to be, you know, like you could say like I don't believe that what I'm doing is bad for me, in terms of like a health sense. Like, I don't believe it. I don't believe that being 400 pounds, 500 pounds is uh, a negative impact on my life, and I choose not to believe that, even though the evidence is pointing in that direction. Then you could say, well,
Yeah.
that the evidence is just being discriminatory towards me. And I was like,
Yeah.
no, that's not how that works.
Your video
The doctor
on
said I was
my
fat. That's just fat shaming, and I'm not going back to him now.
Shut
Yeah.
up, fatty.
Wow.
Before anyone gets the wrong conclusions from his or faces, I'm being sarcastic.
I mean, your video on, what was it, My 600-Pound Life, the star of that,
Yeah.
passing away, that was a really well done video. And that's something that a lot of people don't like to hear, but a lot of people need to hear.
Yeah.
A lot of us, our natural reaction is to spurn at the truth. We don't want to be told no. We don't want to be told what we're doing is wrong, or what we believe is wrong, or how we grew up is wrong, But
And it doesn't even that it doesn't even have to be like that is wrong. Some people won't even entertain the possibility that it might be.
right. Yeah.
Question my dogma. You're questioning God.
No?
Hey, if you ever hear someone literally say that, then you just turn it right around and explain. You realize you just said your dogma is God. Like, what you believe is God, your beliefs aren't God.
It's like,
they're not immutable. They're
I just
not
believe
unchangeable.
I just believe the Bible.
No, you
It's like,
don't.
No, you don't.
You believe what you were taught about the
You
Bible.
exactly. You have your doctrine, and that's there you go. And then
That's
you
shaped-
make that synonymous with what the Bible is, and then don't question it any further. That you stop at that point. And that there are certainly layers of that in anything, certain layers of understanding, and you can argue on those layers of understanding, but there's always deeper layers of understanding that sometimes might completely destroy whatever it is you're standing on that makes sense from your level of understanding. But once you go deeper, you're like, oh, well, what I'm saying has absolutely no ground whatsoever, because maybe because it's in English language. And what I really need to have as an understanding of Hebrew, to and not just the language of Hebrew, but like cultural context of Hebrew, and not just the cultural context of Hebrew, but the cultural context of being an Israelite in that time period, and not just being an Israelite in that time period, but knowing what the surrounding cultures in that time period thought and believed, because that's the total context. And if you don't have that context, your English understanding of trying to apply it to your life right now basically means nothing.
Yeah,
And
English
it's
is a very.
fair to say.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Duffy.
It's fair to say that everyone's understanding or beliefs are going to be in one way or another, or multiple ways, shaped by their pastor, their teacher, their parents, their culture, their traditions, and stuff. And it's really so much more difficult to do than it is to say or tell you to do. But it's so difficult to strip all that away and really figure out the truth apart from everything you grew up with and apart from everything you were taught. So we're not
A lot of work.
We're not suggesting anyone is a bad person for not doing that work or not getting that far into that work. But if you aren't going to do that kind of research and that work, you should not be you
Yeah.
should be open to being wrong.
And
And
for
even though we've done
instance,
that work to a certain extent in our own lives, we're
there
still
you go.
open to being corrected.
Okay, there you go. Yeah, you're saying basically what I was going to say. None of us are like PhD level scholars here. So I mean,
Nope.
like, and even
No.
if we were, we could still be wrong.
Yeah. Well, I think like a perfect example of what you said, like when you pinned it down, Stephen, of like not just this, but this and this, and you start to do like a microcosm of understanding. You know, you growing up, you always heard that phrase, you know, go the beat, go the second mile, whatever. You know, taken from that verse, if a man compels you to walk with him a mile, go with him, you know, two. And every time I heard that, I'm like, okay, that means I just need to be like a better friend. Like if my buddy's going through a hard time and like I need to help him, I'm gonna go the extra mile for my friend, and I would go the extra mile for my friend. But like the context in that verse is that it's not like helping your friend. The context with that verse is that Roman soldiers could compel a Jewish guy who's like minding his own business and be like, here, hold my stuff and walk with me for a mile. So it's like, man, well, you know, I'm trying to, you know, get groceries for the home. It don't matter. Roman soldiers said, do this, you come with me for a mile. And so like Jesus telling them, hey, a Roman soldier is telling you to go with him for a mile. Don't just go with him for a mile and then go home. Go with him too. So it wasn't even being about being a good friend, you know. It was about something completely different.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And it that what you're talking about right there is you know, basically what we were saying before is that there's a lack of understanding of the cultural context.
Mm-hmm.
And so you had an interpretation that isn't a bad thing.
Right.
You know, going an extra mile for you, that's not a bad thing. It's just not what that was saying.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, I'm not trying to throw the baby out with the bathwater here. So like there's times when you have a verse that people say, well, this means this, and you know, there might be some good that comes out of that understanding, and it might be a moral thing, or it might be, you know, whatever, that's actually a positive thing. But it's like, yeah, that's great, but that's not what that's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Another example comes to mind where it's in Genesis when Abram sends out his servant to find a wife for his daughter, and the servant's like, I, being in the way, the Lord led me to, you know, whomever. And I've heard people were like, you know, I was in God's way and I was just holding up God, and then like I was in the way, but God showed me the way I go. It's like, no, the servant is saying I being in like the way I was supposed to be in, like me doing the right thing and me following his directions. I was in that way. And so the Lord led me as I was in his way. The Lord led me to, you know, what I need to do. Not like, you know, I don't know.
I think a lot of people don't realize that our sayings and idioms aren't actually 6,000 years old. They've only been around for a little while.
Why would you not know that raining cats and dogs means raining really hard? I thought perhaps in that time period, what was really going on is they were having some freak storms that were picking up higher, you know, batches of cats and dogs and throwing them across the city.
Like a tornado. That's what I'm thinking.
Catnado.
Oh, gosh.
Cownado.
It's from the famous Catnado of Egypt in the era of Ramses II that we got the parody Sharknado. Everything connects.
Exactly.
Everything.
It's all connected. I mean,
all
to be fair, that's pretty.
It's not even just idioms and sayings like, you know, I was in the way. Not being an idiom is like, it means something different, but even just singular words that don't have the same meaning in English that it did in the original language.
No, like, so for instance, hand under thigh, making an oath.
Oh my goodness.
Literally grabbing you by the balls. That's like you're literally grabbing.
Seriously?
Yes. That is a basically a euphemism used to say that you are grabbing the genitals, and it's this idea of like my line is now like, you know, your line, my line. It's really interconnected. It's this whole like tying of fates. together.
Yeah. And I just thought it was really weird when Abraham wanted his servant to grab him by his flabby man skin on the leg there.
Nope, it's not that at all.
Oh.
It's worse.
much worse.
It's worse.
It's much worse.
You thought it was bad. No.
Oh, gosh.
You had no idea.
We've seen that.
You were like, man, the proximity to my genitals is really strange. No, you don't realize how close we're talking.
That reminds me.
Got himself a handful.
So we would, we'd be in, like, I attended Bible college, for those who may not know. And so, like, we'd come across, this part. And so, you'd be sitting next to your friend or whatever, and, hey, can you take me, to, work afterwards? Like, yeah. And then, like, we would grab each other, like, on the thigh in close proximity, not on it, but we'd grab each other by the thigh and be like,
Yeah.
swear to me, like in our Batman voice. Swear to me.
In a
Grabbing-
Batman voice.
In a Batman voice in a Baptist college, guys grabbing each other by the thighs. Man. Wild times.
Oh, man.
And then jihad.
2 years of
Oh,
jail.
my
man.
goodness.
No, but like, see, yeah, you were saying like not just, but a single word being different is like, no, you really, like
Yeah.
we really don't understand how different what we're thinking about and what they're thinking about when you say something is. It's really different.
I was going to make the point about how Jesus said you need to hate your father and mother if you really want to be able to follow him, and that not
No, that's
meaning-
good too. That's
that
good
not meaning
too.
despise. But you just blew my mind out of the water with
Yeah.
with the
No, like the whole love and hate thing. I have loved, Jacob and hated Esau. It's like,
Mhm.
bruh, he doesn't really mean
Right.
what you're saying here. Not
Mhm.
only are you wrong about the context of what he's talking about, you're wrong about those words.
I mean,
gosh. Okay, I don't know if Gary, if you've ever seen this, but I know Steven and I have seen this. It's this Pro ZD video where he's the art writing a clickbait headline. It's like, tickle their balls a little. You gotta tickle them more. It's like, I promise to do that. No, you gotta go further. I vow to do that. Tickle them more. I'm gonna literally grab you by the balls and make this promise. That sounds perfect. I like it.
I feel like we need to do a sketch for
We
that.
need to do that. We need to do that. We should do that just for like to put at the beginning of this video of this podcast. Like we do a little sketch and then the intro and then the podcast, and they'll find out what that means later.
You know what though, Duffy? You need to do it, and you need to do it with like a couple of different costumes.
Like a mustache.
Yeah, yeah, a mustache on top of your current mustache.
you just have like these weird.
I'll do it. There we go.
You
For anyone
definitely
already
need it.
gotten to this point of the podcast, now you know why you saw what I haven't made yet for the podcast.
Why are they talking about you?
Oh gosh.
Weird thing out
my
there.
I don't
Lord,
understand. And it's in an episode about
Tickle them
Lovecraft?
more. Yeah, this is gonna get a little strange. Like I forgot that we were talking about Lovecraft, but no. Like you said, like we were saying, Jesus says to people, let the dead bury their dead. If you want to follow me, follow me. Or
Mhm.
You must hate your father and mother if you want to follow me. That goes like super contrary to what Yahweh taught the Israelites, saying, "Hey, honor your father and mother." And meanwhile,
Mhm.
Jesus is saying, "Hate your father and mother." Clearly, these things can't be
Yeah.
contradicting. So you gotta. That's when you realize, oh, hate doesn't actually mean what it means in English. It means something different.
else. Yeah.
Right.
It's when you dig into it, that's when you realize, okay, it's about sort of like a ranking system, And by this point, by high school, I recognized this to be the case. Like, okay, it's meaning, your love for God should be so much more than love for your parents that it should, by comparison, almost seem like hate. But that's kind of an easy way to look to understand that.
Yeah.
But
And, like,
if someone's going to read the Bible in English and assume every word means what they grew up being taught these words mean, they're going to have some problems with the Bible and not understand it.
Oh
What were you
yeah,
saying,
and like I was saying, like misconstruing that stuff like is nothing new. Like even I forget which gospel off the top of my head right now, but Christ tells his disciples to beware the leaven of the Pharisees, And they're like,
Yeah.
did we forget to eat? Did anyone eat a sandwich from the Pharisees? And Jesus is like, no, their doctrine. Leaven is doctrine. Don't follow their teachings. Oh. Or when Jesus is like,
To be fair,
what
though, there were
goes-
plenty of times where they were like, "Bro, we're not
We don't
what
get it,
you're
man.
saying."
yeah, I'm thinking
Could
like,
you go over that one
he's
more
like,
time?
it's what goes
As a
into a
ma-
man that defiles a man, not what comes out. And they're like, did we not wash our hands? Oh, that's dude.
So what's
So you just tell a Samaritan woman, I don't have anything to get a drink. Can you give me some water? No. Well, if you knew who I was, you'd ask me for water. But you can't get any water. I know.
You have nothing to get from the
Keep up with me here. Keep up with me. You're gonna understand in a second here, okay?
human.
Living water.
They're so stupid.
Well, you still don't have a pot to get it with.
That's oh
oh
my god.
goodness. You made me forget what I was going to say.
Sorry.
There's this great line in The Chosen right after that scene with the Samaritan woman, where the disciples come back up and they're like, "We brought food for you," and Jesus said, "I have food that you don't know of." And one of the disciples is like, "Who
You're
brought
right.
you food?
Yeah.
What food?"
Man.
And he's like, "My food is to do the will of my Father that sent me." So you didn't have like a sandwich or anything while we were gone?
Do you all have Asperger's?
Man,
All of you have Asperger's.
I've got to rewatch that season. That's such a good show.
It's, can't wait for them to. They're working on season 2 right now.
They've got
When
to finish it.
Oh, I gotta see this.
If I was
show.
a multi-billionaire, I would just be like, "Here,
Make
it.
the show now.
finish the show."
I was talking. We're just gonna keep going off topic. I don't care. I was talking with someone recently, and we're talking about like really bad Christian productions, and I was like, "Yeah, but you got to see The Chosen." And I completely forgot this person was Presbyterian, and was just like, "No," because I've got like this whole conviction about not like portraying Jesus or viewing anything that portrays Jesus, and I'm like, okay,
So you guys do know
but
why?
you're really missing out.
For the record,
Uh-oh.
you guys do know why the whole like graven images thing is there, right? Like apart from the fact that nobody knows what God looks like.
Right.
In the ancient world, you would create a idol of stone or wood,
Mhm.
and then you would call down the deity to take up residence in that
idol.
stone or wood idol in order to make a deal with it.
Mhm.
So like
Yes, but the Presbyterian Church says
on some level, yeah, don't do that with like, statues of Jesus in a a Catholic church or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, I get that. That's probably crossing the line on some level. But like portraying Jesus in a film or a play, no. That's not
Yeah, like this guy isn't. Yeah, like it's a completely different thing. It's not. You're not calling down Jesus to possess this dude.
certainly.
Yeah, it's like Lord Jesus, come into this statue and teach us. No, that's not what we're doing here.
I mean, we saw the Israelites attempt to do something just like that before even getting the Ten Commandments. Like, build us an idol so that we can worship the God that just got us out of Egypt.
Well, yeah, because
the golden calf's not actually God, but you do that, and now
that's
look what
that's
happens.
all they knew about how to function.
Yeah,
like theologically,
which is kind of why they needed it written down.
Yeah,
Like,
basically,
this is for 400 years. You guys have been inside this culture of multiple gods and idols and stuff. So yeah, we kind of need to write this down, black and white, chiseled in a rock. Get this straight.
Yeah. So I mean, that's another one of those things. It's like you look at it and you say, well, no graven images, and it's like, well, what does that mean, for us? And it's like, well, first of all, you got to figure out what it means for them before you can say what it means for us. Oh, also, one of the commandments: "Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain." Taking the name, is a concept of taking his like I said, the name is synonymous with God. Like if you bear the name of God, you are acting in God's stead or in God's power. Like so, the name was in the angel of the Lord. He
So
bore the name
acting,
of the angel of the Lord.
so acting as though you have the name of God's authority
Or
backing you up in your actions.
or if you bear the name of because you're chosen, don't do it in vain.
Okay.
So don't do things that would blaspheme the name of or that would harm the name of God
Right.
because you bear his name.
And as Christians, that's pretty applicable to.
Well, yeah, no, Jesus
to
even talked about that
Christians.
because you're the temple. You are sacred space. You're the tabernacle. You're the temple. There's no more need to go and have a priest take to cleanse the space because the space has been cleansed once and for all through the
Right.
blood of Christ, and therefore you are now cleansed and always sacred space because God dwells in you. So boom, it's like theology. It's like we don't need to have all of these things to cleanse the tent of meeting or the temple ritually to make
Mhm.
sure that we can have fellowship with God because
Right.
we have been cleansed ritually and morally, period, forever. Through the sacrifice of Christ, and so we can go boldly into the throne room. So like when in the New Testament when they're telling the Jews this stuff, they're like, "Well, really?
Well, yeah.
Well, really? Like we could just." There's not this whole concept of like if you do something wrong ritually and you don't figure it out and you walk into sacred space, you automatically explode.
Right. That doesn't have. That's not the case anymore. That's been.
That's not
That's
the case
a lot
anymore.
of pressure hanging over your head, man.
You know what, bro? I'm in. Let's do this.
Return the sheep.
Or on the flip side, maybe they say, "No, I'm not in. I'm going to try and kill you for suggesting such a thing."
Yeah.
Blasphemy.
Which would make sense for the elites of that day to be not cool with it because
Well, yeah,
that's what they based their whole lives on.
Well, like you said earlier, the stock market guys during the 1929 crash, and anyone seeing Cthulhu, if they were to see it, like this was their whole world. At this point, it's either if things are going to change, I might as well kill myself. But you know what? You're not
I'm gonna kill you
God.
instead.
I can kill you instead and stop this in its tracks. There's like you come in here, and the Pharisees and the Sadducees and everyone they're going to be pretty pissed at you. So no wonder they wanted to kill you. No wonder they wanted to kill the apostles. No wonder they literally tried to kill Jesus. I mean, it was all, they had to keep their world intact.
And then they did.
And then they did. And then suddenly they hadn't? Or they did? No, they did. But
they did.
It didn't count anymore.
But he's back.
Yeah,
The long-awaited sequel.
Always think like when people are like, well, if God is real, then he should come down to earth. Like, he did. And we killed him. And we killed him for it. So,
like,
but it was, that was the plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was obscured, for multiple reasons. It was, when they I'm sorry. When people say your eyes were veiled over like the whole concept of like, and they'll use that verse to be like, oh, God blinds people so that they can't be saved. It's like, no, that was literally just, they were blinding the Jews to it so they couldn't see it so that he would be sacrificed for the remission of sins. Like that was the whole point of it. Like it wasn't specifically like, oh no, you can't be saved. So unless God opens your eyes. No, this was a specific thing so that prophecy would be fulfilled.
If every Jew knew crystal clearly that who the Messiah was and what he was going to do and stuff, the second they started talking about killing him, I think someone would have raised their hand and say, hold on a second. Could this be God? Maybe we shouldn't kill him.
What if we didn't? But it's it wasn't just to veil it from the Jews of that day, because they had to go through that process. It had to be veiled in numerous ways because of the powers of the world. Because if the power, the unseen powers of the world knew that was going to be, that's the end game, that's how he wins, they're going to be like, nah, we ain't doing that.
Yeah.
We ain't doing that at all. Nah, bro. That ain't happening.
We're not going to kill him. Let him live.
So
live his life.
that's why when Satan takes Jesus up to, and shows him all the stuff, and he's like, worship me and I'll give you all this stuff. And then, that plan doesn't work out. That didn't go the way he wanted to. He's like, okay, we gotta kill him.
Not knowing that's exactly what Jesus
not knowing
wanted.
that's exactly what I want you to do.
Joke's on you.
I activate my trap card.
Wow. Never thought of it in that way. Never thought of the crucifixion as a trap card. Or that's different. Well, yeah, like the shedding of blood was absolutely necessary for the remission of sin, and without that, there's no salvation.
Yeah. And so, like, if you look at the ancient Israelites, whenever they shed blood in sacrifice, that was primarily for ritual purity, so that you could be in the presence of God. And then you had unintentional sins that were like, that essentially were like, I didn't mean to be impure. I touched a dead body. I didn't mean to. That's not a moral wrong. It's just you have touched death, and therefore you cannot be in the presence of life. So therefore we need to perform this ritual in order to make you ready to be in sacred space again.
Right.
Any other thing that was like, I killed somebody or I whatever else, like you just died. There wasn't a, I'm going to make a sacrifice and everything's going to be cool. You just died.
Well, actually, there were even if you killed somebody, let's say, I killed you, Stephen. Not something I've ever thought about.
I'm talking about intentionally.
Oh.
So if you intentionally took my life.
Right. Okay.
Mary getting pregnant.
Because I was going to cover
with Jesus.
Go ahead. Go ahead. I apologize.
I'm sorry, Duffy. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mary getting pregnant with through the Holy Spirit with Jesus. That was, in any other case, a death sentence for her and possibly even for Joseph. Probably why he wanted to put her away before anyone found out. Like, either one of them could have been stoned to death over what happened, and that was just the way it was. They're like, even if it was considered rape, like, there was still a chance that they might want to just put you down anyway, because that's just the way it was.
No. We'll come back to that, but let Gary say what he was going to say.
Well, I was gonna, you mentioned about murder. I was gonna say, look, the Avenger of Blood, but that's more like my axe head fell off while I was swinging an axe and accidentally killed you. Your next of kin has every right to find me and kill me. However, back then, I could flee to a city of refuge, and as long as I stayed within the walls of that city of refuge,
you're good to go.
I was safe from the Avenger of Blood. Like, there was grace.
There was a refuge. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
And even in certain things, like, if I did something, I could pay. Like, if I did something and I took your eye, I don't have to lose my eye if it was unintentional. I can pay you. Like, in this, now mind you, you're not going to find this in scripture, like, itself. You're going to find it in rabbinic interpretation of scripture,
like Talmud.
Yeah, so you're gonna find it in rabbinic interpretation. It doesn't have to be eye for eye. If I intentionally stabbed you in the eye, yeah, they're probably
I'm getting that eye.
Say I should.
I'm getting that eye.
Yeah, that eye's coming. But if I accidentally did it, like, it's like, no, you got to get your eye gouged out. No, I can just pay you recompense for what that is.
I think I prefer I was gonna say I think I prefer the Danzo Shishui like method, just like boom, just snatch it out of there.
Why do you have all those eyes in your arm? Don't worry about it.
Gosh, I hate that guy. Anyway,
He's such a jerk. Danzo's terrible.
It was the worst. It's followed right after second Hokage, but Danzo was up there.
So
Anyway,
the most racist.
the most racist.
I'll go ahead and correct what I said earlier because I remember now how that worked. Now, if in the case of it being a woman was raped sort of thing, it's not that she'd be really punished for it, but her life would pretty much be over anyway because it's gonna be much more difficult for her to
get
find
married.
someone who would want to marry her.
Yeah.
Which was kind of like super important for a woman back then.
So yeah, depending on the situation, it's up in the air. The father could ask for payment, the bride price, and still keep her. Or now, mind you, that's not in the instance of rape. That's in like an instance of like,
just premarital sex.
yeah, that word. My brain was like, how say words.
I love how you talk like a person who English is their second language, but it's not. English is your first language.
Yes. So there's like the instances of like, if a man forces himself on a woman in the countryside, it's assumed that she did not consent. It's the assumption that she did not, because no one would even be around to hear her cry out at all. So like that guy gets the death penalty.
Gets the wood chipper.
Yeah, he gets the wood chipper. And in an instance of a in being in the city, if something happens like that, and the woman does not cry out, that being assumed that she didn't cry out for help means that she would have been complicit in the act of fornication or whatever. So like that would have been that instance because she didn't cry out for help. And so there are multiple layers of like trying to make sure that like that law is parsed out so that people are not like unjustly dealt with. But you also need to understand that this law is a human law. I understand that it's in like a scriptural context, but it's a human law written for those people at that time. It's not perfect. It's absolutely not perfect. It's not going to be perfectly just for all people involved. And you can disagree with that if you want to. But if it were absolutely perfect, we would do it now. But like that was a way for them to be able to produce as much good out of a situation as possible, because it's basically a legal text. And they only had so much to go on.
So you're saying this is just the way we're going to do things to try and deter people from?
Yeah. So like you have principles of trying to protect people, preserve life, and to cause as little harm as possible while seeking justice for wrongdoing. And they're like, cool, we got these principles in hand. This is what we're going to try to do based on our understanding of the world.
I mean, when it comes to rape, I feel like the story of what was it Jacob's sons that went after?
Wait.
Something wrong?
I don't know.
No, you're on. The sons of Jacob, their sister Dinah, who was raped.
After what they did to that whole city or tribe or whatever it was, I feel like this should be
everybody's
deterrent enough.
Getting it.
Everyone, not only is everyone getting adult time circumcision, but next day, while you're over there making vows with yourself, you cradle your family jewels, you're gonna die.
Yeah, I mean, think of the last part of the book of Judges, where a woman who is, you know, trigger warning, explicit material warning, she is raped to death, and then her body parts are sent out to the heads of the different tribes of Israel because of this injustice that happened in this one. I think it was in the tribe of Dan, and then everyone got together and pretty much wiped out the tribe of Dan. I mean, because of this.
And Dan is not included in the record of the tribes anymore.
Right. Yeah. Dan ain't there. So I mean, go back to your room. So, I mean, it's some crazy stuff, and
yeah.
One
and
thing.
I think when you start, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. I got another. I was going to branch off the.
No, I was going to say. I think when you start looking at all of those instances of law and order and crime and punishment in the scope of that culture, that point in history, you start to understand that it's not, there's certain theological things that are being expressed in certain laws, but then in certain ways it's just about the principles embodied of how can we best, like I said, preserve life and seek justice and do it. Yeah.
There's a little harm
seek justice, love mercy, walk humbly with your God. It's sort of like, how can we best do that? And so they come up with the best thing that they've got, and then they go for it. And if you look at it in comparison to other cultures in that time, it was pretty good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I mean, yeah, for the contemporary other cultures, yeah. I mean, you had, to an extent, pretty much the only civil country in comparison.
To touch on a little bit more on Mary and Joseph, what you mentioned earlier, Duffy, is something I think a lot of people overlook and maybe not think of, like the weight of it, is that Christ was virgin born. Like, we know he was like virgin conceived. All right, Holy Spirit came upon her. Jesus is there. But like, even after all that, Joseph did not lie with her.
Yeah.
Until after.
Yeah, until after all that. I mean, so she's expecting, they get married. He still withholds his, I mean, they don't engage in marital activities.
They don't consummate.
So, yeah, they don't consummate. That's a good word. And so, I mean, so kudos to them for that.
Yeah, I think we know that Jesus had brothers and sisters, right? So we know that they did eventually. Mary wasn't the perpetual virgin that some people make her out to be.
No, she stopped being a virgin. Sorry.
Yeah, it did happen. It's grown up time, guys. She got married.
So.
But yeah, so there is
this episode's getting a little bit more adult than I thought it would be.
Oh goodness, yeah, we went from
considering we're talking about like ancient giant, like Lovecraftian eldritch deity things.
I mean, we were
sort of adult already.
I mean, you can talk about cosmic horror without getting into the kind of topics that we're discussing right now. There is a one of the very few decently made Christian movies, and it's The Nativity Story. And it actually kind of, directs the audience's attention to think about what kind of doubts and horrible thoughts had to be going through Joseph's head when he found out Mary was pregnant, and the angel comes to him in that dream.
Yeah, there you go.
But it's in the dream where, in that dream, Joseph's being handed a stone and pointed to Mary, be like, this is kind of like, you go ahead and throw the first rock. She was your betrothed. And then the angel appears and is like, Joseph, here's the deal. God's kid. Please don't do this. Name him Jesus. You'll be fine.
Yeah, but I mean, without that intervention, there would have been no way for him to know that at all.
Yeah,
right.
And no way for him to he wouldn't have either. As a Jewish man in that time period, heck no way that he would have taken her word for it.
Mm-mm.
Well, he said
Zero way. Which is why there was divine intervention, because if not, it would have been like, well, I'm divorcing, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Jesus,
and then she would have been dealt with.
And like you said before, the messianic prophecies were all so clouded at best, so that no one really knew what's going on. To think that someone was going to give birth to the Son of God, a mortal woman, that's just like, that's not in the Old Testament as far as any of them knew. That's not in the Holy Scriptures. So Mary says, "No, the Holy Spirit did this to me." Like, sure he did. And I'm sure that he's going to help raise too. Is he going to pay child support? No, this isn't in the Scriptures. No Pharisee was teaching that.
Yeah, well, and I people will look at that and like, say, well, they'll what you're just talking about. They're not understanding the culture of the Jews at that time. They wouldn't. They wouldn't. They would say things like, "There's no reason for the." You know what? I'm gonna start over. Not understanding the culture at that not understanding the culture at that time, they would basically say that, oh well, obviously it was cheating, or they would say obviously it was his kid, or they would say any number of things that would try to get around the story, but like those things wouldn't have been supported by the cultural context.
Mhm.
Especially not the whole cheating concept. That's like right out.
That's a bit too much of a gamble for anyone back then.
Oh yeah, and it wouldn't have been. He would have had every right as a man to be able to get out of that.
Yeah.
And wouldn't have like felt pressured at all to stay. It's not like our understanding of relationships now versus then are not the same.
No.
Sure.
No, absolutely not. But yeah.
I think we could say the more we learn about God, the more wonderful everything seems. His creation seems, and he seems, but not so much with Cthulhu. All right. Taking it right back to where we started. And does anyone else have anything else you want to say?
I would say the great opposing thought between the Cthulhu mythos and the Bible scripture is that Cthulhu, Azeroth, Amon, all them, they're so terrifying because they're so huge, but they're so uncaring and unaffected by what we do. Whereas God is huge, God is big, but there's a personal relationship that is desired and created through the person of Jesus Christ. So I'll put that down as probably the biggest opposing thing between the two, and I can appreciate that.
I think we ought to.
That's all I got.
That's a good takeaway. All right, well, Duffy, if you want to end us out here.
Thank you all for watching The Power, or listening to, I guess. You can't see nothing. Thank you for listening to The Power of God in Anime. Hopefully you did at least watch the opening. If I actually did this, probably won't remember to until the last second, and it'll look like crap. But thank you anyway. And again, I'm Duffy. This has been Steven and Gary with me, and no main character for some reason. I think you probably met Cthulhu earlier today, and that's why he's not with us. But we will see you again some other time after we record another episode. Thank you. You guys can say bye too if you want.
No.
I would.